the Herald Sun in Australia, and they were asking her about the allegations of bullying against Meghan Markle, which I'm sure viewers will be aware of. It created a lot of headlines here, even though Meghan Markle and her lawyers have always steadfastly denied it. And she revealed that she was interviewed by palace officials about these allegations, and she didn't go further than that to comment on the allegations or give any more detail, but it's quite significant because we know a number of staff were interviewed, but not who. So now it's the question, will this perhaps embolden other members of staff to step forward and talk about it? But yeah, it's quite an interesting thing that she's revealed.
It is interesting. Now, as Natasha says, we should stress that lawyers for Meghan have denied all of these bullying claims. But Richard Kay, the point about that Tom Bower made, that echoing again, Natasha, that he feels that it will embolden more people to come forward. Do you think that's true?
It might, but I suspect a lot of the people who were interviewed for the course of that inquiry had already signed NDA, non-disclosure agreements, which would put them in deep trouble if they were to open their mouths. Also, as Natasha pointed out, Samantha was a very senior courtier, worked at the highest levels of Buckingham Palace, whereas we know for a fact that many of the people interviewed for the inquiry are much more junior staff and may not feel as emboldened to come forward. But look, anything is possible. And if there is a sort of a crack in this, and the fact that this report has been buried and not been made public has annoyed and upset a lot of people who feel it should be. So maybe that may well happen.
Yes, indeed, Richard. Even it does, to many people, feel like it raises more questions than answers them, doesn't it, this whole episode?
It's a very unsatisfactory situation all round. I mean, remember why this investigation was launched. It was after the former aide, Jason Knauf, went public, and they leaked his complaints, and it was reported in the Times newspaper. Then this investigation was launched. And, say you're going to launch an investigation, but they're not giving any of the results. It's, not only is it unsatisfactory for people who claim they're being mistreated or bullied, but also for Meghan, because, these accusations are left hanging there. But, I mean, what surprises me is, why is Meghan not calling for the results to be made public? As you say, she's always insisted that she's got, she did nothing wrong. Well, she should put pressure herself on Buckingham Palace to release the results of this investigation.
Interesting take. So watch this space. Now, sticking with the Sussexes, you've written about Meghan's new podcast plans. What's the scoop there?
You might remember that after they quit royal duties, they rushed into these various lucrative deals, and one of them was with the audio giant Spotify for many millions of dollars. They didn't produce much content. I think it was about 12 episodes of Meghan's podcast. When we first heard about this deal, it was with Harry. He appeared on one, and we thought, it could be quite fun. But then poor old Harry, he got banished. It was all Meghan, and it was a whole series. And as you know, I had to listen to each one as part of my work for this programme.
What do you mean had to? It was a treat. You got to listen to them.
It was a weekly honour.
You got paid to listen.
Yes. So anyway, but then that deal came to an end. Rather acrimoniously, you'd have to say, because one of the Spotify executives, Bill Simmons, made some very unflattering comments about using the word grifters.
I'd still fantasise about getting drunk with that guy. hearing a little bit more.
Yeah, he did tease that he would say so much more if he had a night out with a few drinks. So that's still to come. But anyway, after that, clearly Meghan was keen for some positive publicity. A few months later, early this year, she announced that she'd signed a new deal to re-release those old podcasts and also make a new series for a very small company that none of us had heard of, Lemonada Media. Anyway, so my story this week is apparently there will be no podcast this year. So we're in a situation where...
Well, it's nearly May. Why bother?
Exactly. Yeah. So, up to a year after announcing the deal, we'll have to wait before we hear anything. And now, come on, this is a very strange way of operating. I mean, take Netflix. They will announce, a new film or something when it's about to... it's gone into production or it's about to be broadcast a few weeks ahead. It's very strange to announce deals and then have nothing. Announcing a deal like this and then not producing any content, any podcasts for a year, it does make me a bit suspicious about Meghan's motives. You do wonder, is she just doing it for the publicity? Hopefully, eventually, she will produce something and I'll be shown to be wrong. But until then, it does make me suspicious.
Harry and Meghan announced a big trip to Nigeria, ostensibly to promote the Invictus Games. Richard Eden and Rebecca English explain why this visit wasn't without controversy.
I've made the point in my newsletter, an article for Mail Plus this week, that Invictus Games is a great project. I think everyone agrees it's done a lot for injured former servicemen and women and helped them to compete and turn their lives around. So it's been great. But I've just made the point that we shouldn't overlook that there is a scandal in Africa connected with one of his charities. It's a very key charity for Harry documentary. Well, that hasn't happened, and it makes you wonder. I can imagine him at the meeting, saying, I want to make a show about Africa, and them saying, wouldn't that be very expensive? Would it be great to have a privileged white man going to Africa to give this documentary? So any of that hasn't happened. So what has he been left with? A programme about the poshest sport that there is.
The most privileged white man sport there is.
Is polo. I mean, my goodness, both these projects, we've heard all these rumours about their deal with Netflix is going to come to an end shortly, at the end of this year probably. To me, this bears it out in a way, because both projects are very cheap. Netflix has got massive budgets, but instead it's just a cookery programme, filmed at a house in Montecito, and polo, which kind of he does anyway, take along a camera crew.
They've blown their budget on the deal, that £100 million deal with Meghan and Harry.
I mean, what is much more interesting, though, is Meghan's programme, actually. Much more interesting, because from everything I hear, they see it as a chance to recoup some of the money for Netflix, because there are going to be commercial spin-offs from it.
We'll talk about that in a second, but I just want to stay on this polo match for the moment, because, Charlotte, there was some controversy, wasn't there, over Harry and Meghan on the polo field that's got a lot of people talking.
Yeah, so Meghan's mask slipped, for sure, and we saw her true colours, I'd say. And I've watched this clip 100 times, because Harry's standing there with his trophy, and a woman comes up and tries to stand next to him. Normal thing, there's lots of people lined up, and Meghan just basically sort of verbally yanks her away from him and places this woman next to her, so she's not next to Harry. And she sort of points several times in this video, and you can see it online. There's a clip of it. And she says, "Would you like to stand over here? Would you like to stand over here?" over and over again. And it just shows how choreographed all of this is. And of course, the Netflix cameras were rolling. But Meghan, I think in her mind, clearly, she's got a very photographic mind, I'm guessing. She was imagining the photos, and she wanted to be the woman next to Harry, clearly. And I just think it just shows these things are very choreographed. And it's not the first time at a polo match that her mask has slipped either, because it happened in 2022 as well. She kept trying to edge her way to the front, holding her hat to the front of the same scene, the polo lineup. And she couldn't quite make her way with her hat underneath all their arms. And it was just, it was choreography nightmare. And it goes to show she's desperate to be front and centre of these things.
And I have to say that this woman who was wanting to stand next to Harry, this wasn't just some beautiful model that's there for a pretty picture. This was actually Dr. Sophie Chanduka, who is the boss of Prince Harry's charity, Centre Barlow.
She has every right to stand next to him then.
My goodness, that sort of dismissive tone with her is really cringe-making.
Yes, because she's very bossy. She really points and says, sort of get out of the way, as if she's a lackey.
Dr. Chanduka is a very distinguished character, so it's going to be interesting to see how long she remains in that job.
Well, and it was things that were a little bit more precisely planned was the jam presentation. Tell us, who got the jam? This is what I want to know.
Well, exactly, because I suppose, look, I'm not an influencer.
Oh, so you didn't get any jam?
Funny enough, no, but as I think I said before, I do have some of my mum's pickled onions, if anyone would like to share them after the show. They're very good, they're very strong. We have to say,
we've got terrible problems with the post in Britain, so I'm sure that those hampers of jam are on their way to us as we speak.
Yes, and it's a preserve, so it will keep, don't worry.
But it actually genuinely intrigues me how this works, because suddenly these pictures started popping up. I think we had 2 on one day, we've now had a third, to a lady who turns out to be the wife of the boss of Paramount. You've got one of Meghan's friends, I think now, Mindy Kaling, I don't know if you pronounce her, who's quite a big figure in US entertainment, has appeared on Meghan's podcast. suddenly all very similarly posed pictures of this artfully arranged pot of jam in a basket of lemons, slightly inexplicably.
With the lid still on.
Yeah, and saying, oh, I love your jam, it's amazing, when clearly it hasn't even been opened.
Yeah.
You know, that stuff just doesn't
maybe they've had it
to
for
me.
breakfast before when she's been making it around, you know.
And all of them is numbered 1 to 50, so there must be a guessing game. So who got number 1? Who was number 50? Like, is this a pecking order of how important you are in terms of
I'd be offended if I got number 50 out of 50.
I have to say that King Charles might have the last laugh, though, because sources at his Highgrove shop in Gloucestershire tell me there's been a real run on his Highgrove strawberry conserve. So what's happened is these sort of loyal royalists, you know, all this talk about Meghan's jam, well, they want to go and buy a pot of King's Good
and also,
conserve.
Is it mean of me to slightly observe that, you know, Meghan's giving her food to rich influencers and William's out there today giving food to the needy?
Well, there is a point, and he did bring some stuff from his own kitchen to give to them. And of course, Highgrove jam and also Duchy Originals products. All of the money from Highgrove produce goes to charity, and the Duchy Original range, which Charles set up many years ago, all of it originally went to charity. Then they did a deal with Waitrose, which profits of it, but a significant proportion of the profits still go to the King's charities. So they're very, very different setups. So because I'm presuming, we haven't been told yet, but I'm presuming not a great portion of the jam money will go to.
We don't know how much this jam costs yet, but Meghan Meghan will charge $200 a pop because she thinks so well of it.
But we must admit, it's been a great publicity stunt.
There were some unwelcome headlines for Meghan Markle following an interview with a former senior palace courtier. Natasha Livingston and Richard Kay explain, while Richard Eden explains his story about Meghan's podcast plans hitting another snag.
Are you serious?
Samantha Cohen worked for the Queen, I think for around 17 years, so she was incredibly well experienced, and then went on to work for the Sussexes, and then left after, I think it was about 2 years. So she didn't stay with them for that long and did the job, I think, on the request really of the Queen. She's not spoken publicly about this time. You know, obviously loyal royal aides are normally very tight-lipped about these sort of things, but she is Australian and was interviewed by the Herald Sun.